Hello and welcome to Hudson Institute. My name is Peter Rao. I'm a senior fellow here at the Institute, analyzing European affairs. And it's my pleasure and privilege to welcome today to the Institute His Excellency Mikko Hautala, the Ambassador of the Republic of Finland to the United States. The Ambassador has a long and distinguished career, a storied career in the Finnish diplomatic corps. He has served in such interesting places and important places as attaché to Kyiv. He was formerly Finland's ambassador to Moscow, now of course ambassador here in Washington. And in Helsinki, he has served as senior policy advisor to both the foreign minister and the president of Finland. We've invited him here today because less than 1 week from now, NATO will be summiting in Madrid. And top of the agenda, along with the war in Ukraine, and I would say related to that, is Sweden and Finland's bid to join the North Atlantic Treaty Organization sometime soon. So we wanted to get a view from Helsinki by way of Washington on how the Nordics view the alliance, Finland's place within it, and more broadly, the Nordic view of the European security architecture. Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for coming to Hudson Institute.
Thank you for the invitation. It's great to be here.
My pleasure. I'll begin with maybe the most basic of all questions. This would be the first time in modern history, if Finland and Sweden joined the alliance, that all of the Nordic states are part of a common security alliance. And I think it's quite obvious, it doesn't take a great analyst of international affairs to realize why Finland might want to be within NATO. February 24th was a watershed moment, and Finnish public opinion shows huge flips from even last year to today. But if Finland wants to be in NATO, why does NATO want Finland in the alliance? If you're talking to an American viewer out there, what is it that Finland contributes to American and European and NATO security that makes you an attractive candidate for accession?
I think we contribute three things. One thing is, and I think it's really important, in Finland you would get a solid democratic country with a long history of being a democratic country, with a solid record in human rights, rule of law. It's the least corrupted country in the world, many years. It's also the happiest country on earth. So I think we are a perfect candidate in terms of our overall credentials. Secondly, NATO would get significant military capabilities. We have one of the largest, strongest armed forces in Europe. We have 280,000 men in the reserve army, and we have 900,000 trained men that are eligible for service. We also have a modern air force. We have many modern weaponry systems. So I think it's a common understanding that Finland would definitely enhance the defense capabilities of the alliance. Thirdly, I would say that Finland also will bring a certain geographical and historical experience, how to deal with one of our neighboring countries, which is Russia. We do have 800 miles of common border. We do also have a lot of experience how to deal with that, how to also cooperate with Russia on those issues which we need to cooperate with. So I think you will get, I would say, solid package of democratic credentials, military capabilities, and also historical, geographical experience. So I think, and I think I'm not alone here in the US, I think Finland would tremendously increase the NATO's defense deterrence into Northern Europe. Of course, I'm not the Swedish ambassador, but I think my Swedish colleague would basically say the same things.
And we just had the Swedish ambassador here recently, so I would also commend that discussion in our ambassador series to all of you watching at home. Perhaps then to stay with geography, if Finland, happy warriors, as you just described them, join the alliance, it would, I think, significantly upgrade Baltic security. Helsinki is just a stone's throw away across the Gulf of Finland from Tallinn. But then also it would mean that 7 of 8 Arctic nations in the world are part of the NATO alliance. Could you just touch briefly on those two geographic components, what Finland adds to Baltic security in particular, which is always considered something of a vulnerability for NATO, and then secondly, the high north, where Finland has, both in winter warfare and other areas, I think a unique point of view and capabilities?
Yeah, I think Finland is geographically, it's a kind of a linchpin between the Baltic Sea area and the high north, the Arctic area. Obviously, Finland joining, I think it would definitely strengthen and make it easier for the alliance to defend the Baltic Sea area, because it would give us more capabilities and chances to operate together with Air Force, maritime domain, also the Army side. So I think it will make it easier to defend, and it will make it also easier to plan for the common defense. The same goes for the High North, because obviously we have also like 500 miles of common border with Norway, which is already in alliance, which already shares the border with Russia. So
Right.
I think the northern side, the High North, is also, I think the Finland joining would make a lot of sense. Obviously also Sweden, because it's the three countries up there. So I think it would make the whole defense of the Northern Europe more kind of a logical, solid. It would make it possible for us to, without any kind of seamlessly cooperate in case of a crisis. But we also do understand that NATO is a defensive alliance. I think our goal is to join the alliance, not that we would be a threat against anybody. We would simply see that in this situation, it's important that we will increase the common defense deterrence so that we could actually avoid the conflict. So we don't see joining NATO as a kind of, we mainly see it as a way of improving the deterrence and a way of avoiding the conflict.
Related to that, one issue that analysts have worried about is the time period between Finland's stated public intentions to join the alliance and actual membership, at which point ironclad Article 5 guarantees apply. Now you have, and I don't want to call them loose guarantees, you have some guarantees from the Americans and others, I think the Brits as well, that they will stand by Finland's side in the meanwhile. But given your unique experience also as ambassador to Moscow and some of the saber-rattling we've heard from Vladimir Putin pertaining to Finland's stated goals, what are some of the perhaps hybrid threats or other issue sets that you worry about in the coming months while Finland makes its way through this process?
Yeah, basically, I don't see this period as many people call it, a gray zone or gray time. I basically see the situation fairly simple. I think we have received firm assurances from the US, from a number of European countries, UK, France, Germany, that they would support Finland. Mm-hmm. So I think we are clear on that. And I also believe that it simply wouldn't make any sense for NATO to simply say that you are free to apply, and if you make it, then welcome. But if something bad happens on the way, then you are on your own.
The credibility.
I think that would simply that wouldn't serve NATO very well. So I don't expect that Finland would be alone in this kind of a situation. Then, as regards the Russian reactions, I think it's fair to say that Russia has always been against NATO enlargement, including enlargement via Finland. They have said it many times, but at the same time, the usual Russian response has been that we would be against, but it's your choice. It's your choice as a sovereign country. And what we are doing is now that we are exercising our right as a sovereign country. I don't think the Russians are I don't expect that they would react militarily. Obviously, we might see some sort of informational warfare. I don't exclude any cyber activities. But frankly, I don't see Russia seeing this as a kind of a step that would escalate the conflict, and they would kind of have to react in a really heavy manner. There's also a matter of timing, because I think Russia is militarily fairly busy now in Ukraine, to put it mildly. They also have the resources tied to this conflict, and many of the garrisons close to the Finnish border are basically half empty because of this situation. So I think this is also a reality. So currently the situation between Finland and Russia in terms of military posturing and all that, it's quiet, and there's no extraordinary things happening, and also the border situation is fully under control. So I think the Russians most likely will, down the road, they will first assess what this NATO membership will mean militarily, what kind of possible assets there will be in Finland, and how Finland will kind of what kind of positions Finland will have as a member state. Then they will react in a way that, and I expect that they will strengthen those bordering regions. They will perhaps have more assets in there. But as I said, I think it's that kind of reaction is fairly typical in these situations. But I don't expect any kind of a dramatic scenario to take place.
Well, in the short run, as you put it, the Arctic Brigade that the Russians have stationed, I was talking to a contact in Helsinki recently, one of your colleagues, and he noted that it's being shot to bit in Ukraine. So actually, Finnish security is maybe as strong in the pure military sense as it's been in quite some time. But if it isn't going after Finland itself or Sweden as candidate countries, an alternative approach for Russia might be to try to engender opposition amongst the NATO allies who have to ratify the admission process. And that brings me to the country which to date has obviously had the greatest objections to Finland potentially joining, and that is, of course, Turkey. Turkey in the past has been a strong supporter of NATO accession. We know they supported Bosnia-Herzegovina, Ukraine, Georgian applications. They supported North Macedonia, Montenegro, the two most recent countries to join NATO. But they've made no bones about some of their differences with Stockholm and Helsinki over what they say is the PKK file, and then also defense sales after the 2019 incursion that Turkey undertook in Syria. How are the consultations ongoing between your government and the Turks? Do you feel like you're making progress? How do you read this entire state of affairs?
First of all, I have to say that we did consult with Turkey quite extensively in the run-up to the application, and the signals we got from top level down was that Turkey would see our application favorably. So this was a surprise in that sense. We have since then, we've been having consultations with them, negotiations. I would say so that we do have a better understanding of some of the items they want to discuss and what they would like to see. But frankly, I don't think we are not there yet. And I think it now remains to be seen in the run-up to the Madrid summit how this issue will be solved. But I have to say from our side, in relation to terrorism, Finland fully, totally condemns, and we have all the pieces of legislation in place to combat that. PKK is an illegal terrorist organization in Finland, and so on. Secondly, I think one of the items Turkey has mentioned in these occasions is the arms sales. We don't have any arms embargo towards Turkey. We always assess arms sales on a case-by-case basis. So I think we are basically, if you compare Finnish position on all these issues with, I would say, mainstream NATO countries, we are fully aligned with the mainstream NATO countries. We're also ready to accept any formulations which are agreed NATO language. So I think Finland would totally, fully fit the NATO kind of line in all of these issues. Then it remains to be seen how Turkey will play this game in the run-up to the summit. But these negotiations are still going on, and I hope, of course, that we make progress.
Is this the biggest issue that you expect from the summit? I mean, what are your expectations in the days leading into it?
I think it's, I would be quite hesitant to set any kind of deadlines or any kind of conditions in terms of timing. But I would say so that obviously if Madrid summit ends without any kind of result on this, if it stays open, I think there is an unfortunate signal that the situation will send, that the NATO open doors policy is not really fully functioning, because we know that, and I think it's fairly objective to say that Finland fulfills all the criteria of NATO. This is what all the NATO countries, except one, fully acknowledge. And if this kind of candidate, and I think the same goes for Sweden, if they are not able to make progress in this, I think it's I don't think it's not the end of the story, but still it's it's not a good signal if you take into account the context in which we are now operating, which is that we have a major war in Europe.
Right.
We have a major interests in trying to make sure that also the Northern European security stays as it is, and there's a stability in the region.
Sometimes one gets a sense there's almost sort of a bifurcated vision of Ukraine, at least before the war. And I think that still lingers. One sees it in comments coming from Europe and to a certain extent some American quarters. On the one hand, it's considered a frontier of freedom. It's hugely important that the precedence of a war of aggression in Europe does not stand for proliferation issues, for simple questions of humanity, for geopolitical calculations as well. One just needs to look at commodity prices in the Black Sea region to think all that through. But on the other hand, Ukraine clearly has some domestic deficits, and oftentimes it's been viewed, I'd say, almost with derision by some Western European countries as pocket full of corruption, struggling to make some democratic gains. How does Finland view Ukraine? How does it view EU enlargement? What's its vision for where Ukraine fits into the Union?
We've been always a proponent and supporter of enlargement. We believe that all the countries which fulfill the criteria should be able to join if they fulfill all the criteria. So we are basically open towards the enlargement, but we are strict on the criteria because we want the EU to stay strong and capable of action. So you have to be strict on that. I think we do support the Ukrainian aspirations towards the EU. I think it's clear, and we've also helped them along the way in many ways. I think the Ukrainians, we do understand that they are now in the middle of extreme danger. They are fighting for the independence of the country, of the very freedom that we now speak of. So obviously, it's a kind of a special situation right now, but. And I think Ukraine deserves all the support we can give them. But if you talk about the EU membership, of the accession to the Union itself, I think in due course, when Ukraine hopefully makes that progress, obviously they also have to fulfill the criteria in terms of corruption, in terms of governance. You have many issues. But of course, I think in this situation, when Europe will support Ukraine, Ukraine will also receive more help. They will receive more support. But eventually they have to fulfill the criteria, of course. So we support them strongly, but we will also want to make sure that when and if they join, they will join as a country that fulfills all the criteria. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but I hope it happens one day.
I think that's one of the challenges is the war is happening now and tomorrow, and EU enlargement is sort of a distant prospect, even if it's now something that can be envisioned, which might make it attractive to at least try to bring Ukraine into the single market in the short run to buff it up, even as it waits for full membership. But setting that aside, let's stick with Ukraine then. Finland's made a contribution on the side of the Ukrainians in the war. Could you tell us a little bit about that contribution, and then also on the political side, on the diplomatic track? I mean, what is Finland's vision for an end state in Ukraine? What is it trying to accomplish? To what end is it providing weapons and other things to the Ukrainians?
I think the case for our support to Ukraine is totally clear. Ukraine is a victim of unprovoked illegal action. Russia is violating the international law. And according to international law, UN Charter, it's fully legal to support a country which is under illegal attack. So this is the kind of the legal frame under which we are operating. I think it's not always so clear in these situations, but I think Ukraine conflict is totally clear legally, politically, morally. We have been giving support to Ukraine, also lethal support, right from the beginning of the war. So we started even if we were not a member to NATO. So we started that early on. I think we have now sent several shipments. I think the latest one was decided on just 2 weeks ago. We try to help as much as we can. We don't openly disclose the types of weapons that we give.
But today, for our viewers, you will.
I will say that the first shipment we gave, it was mainly anti-tank weapons, ammunition, things like that. So then the further shipments, I have to stay silent on that. But we gave a meaningful military support, and that's a fact. And of course, we hope that Ukraine can defend its independence successfully, also with the help that we have gave them.
And on the political side, I mean, what's the vision for to what end are you delivering these weapons?
I have to confess that as we speak, it's very hard to see how this will turn out. I think we have a kind of a total kind of smoke screen, so it's very hard to assess that. I think it's easy to say that it's going to be a long-term conflict. I think the Russians are, the thing they started, it's a long-term effort, so they will go on. And personally, I don't think they are going to give up. They're not going to give up. So I don't see a kind of any quick fixes that would somehow solve the problem. I hope that the negotiations will start at some point, but I think it's fair to say that this is a long-term conflict, and it's quite hard to see what the elements of end state will be. I think right at the moment, the most important thing is for us to stay focused, keep on supporting Ukraine so that they can successfully defend. So I don't think, to some extent, kind of trying to contemplate and have an idea what the end state would be. I mean, we can do that, but politically speaking, there can also be some problems if we are kind of imagining a peace that is not there, and it's not really possible, at least at the moment. So,
yeah, I mean, I would reinforce that. In my view, I mean, it's up to the Ukrainians to decide what they're prepared to sit down and negotiate with the Russians. I just wouldn't want to see Western support flag in its military so that the Ukrainians are unable to really make the sorts of negotiating moves that they would like to. And so I know we as an institute, and I have in particular been urging the administration and Congress to push as much military kit forward as possible so that the Ukrainians are in as strong a position as it can be when eventually negotiations come.
But I think for the Ukrainians, I think I have served in Kiev. I still speak fairly fluent Ukrainian, so I follow very closely what happens. And I think the fundamental fact is that even if the Russians have a kind of an imperial design plan how to, and I think Putin has been fairly open about this recently, I think the main obstacle for the Russians is that you can't change the Ukrainian people. They are what they are. They want to be Ukrainians. They want to stay, and they want to live in an independent country. So I think if I compare Ukrainian situation with, for example, Afghanistan, how can you rule over 30, 40 million people who don't want to be ruled like that? I think it's a kind of a mission impossible. It's an illusion. But it's a bloody illusion if somebody tries to realize that. But I think the end game for this will definitely be that Ukrainians will be a separate, independent, free nation. Because I think it's impossible, it's simply impossible to try to kind of make them become something else. I don't think that's going to happen. And I think we deserve to help them as much as we can so that it won't happen. Because that would be, even trying this like Russians are doing, I think this is we can see how dramatic the consequences are.
Well, you served in Kyiv, as you just mentioned. You also served in Moscow, and you just touched on the Russian war machine. What is it that you understand about the Russians, or that you've learned maybe anthropologically about Russia, but also the Russian political, military, intelligence leadership that those of us here in the United States, following from afar, might not quite understand?
Well, obviously we have a close cooperation with the administration, also with the Congress. So I do think we do understand all the basics and dynamics of the situation. I think I would simply add that one of the issues in Russia is that I don't see that there are institutions who are making these decisions. These are highly personalized decisions, which is a major difference between us and the Russians. Because in our case, no single man can decide over these matters like just one man. So there are no institutions that are really effective in decision making. That's already one big difference. I think one fundamental thing to be understood is that I think Russia is guided by, I think it's flawed, a mistaken vision, historical vision of trying to kind of rebuild something that they used to have, which is in total contradiction with the, like I said, with the Ukrainian, with what the Ukrainian people actually want. And I don't think any of those, like we used to call them, post-Soviet states, I don't think any of them want to be ruled like in the past, or they want to be part of the Russian-led system as it used to be. So I think, but the Russia is guided by this vision. I think the actions that they are taking are guided by this rather deep vision. And I think that's what makes this a fairly complicated matter, because it's quite hard to compromise with this kind of a vision, which is fairly total. Mm-hmm. Because it's not about some concrete things that you could negotiate over, like be they territorial, substantial. I mean, it's a fairly total vision we are dealing with, and that actually poses a big questions to us, because that's also one of the explaining factors why I do believe it's a long-term conflict.
Do you think that the current levels of support that Putin seems to enjoy and whatever polling is emanating from Russia will be able to hold, especially as projections seem to suggest this will be the case, technological export controls, among other sanctions, will really, I think, put a giant gaping wound into the Russian economy in the months to come. They've been able to sort of, with applications of technocratic central bank morphium, sort of keep the pain at bay, but I suspect it's coming. Do you think this will remain at this levels of support, or do you think he's going to have some problems?
I do believe that the support for Putin, to a large extent, is genuine. Mm-hmm. It's true. You may question some of the figures, are they too high or so, but I think these are details. I think fundamentally the polls tell you that a majority of the Russians do support the president and the policies. So I think that's a reality, and I do believe that it's going to stay like that for quite some time. Then on the sanctions, my kind of personal assessment would be that the sanctions will have an impact. It's clear. They will damage the Russian economy in a serious manner. But I think we have to be clear-eyed on the fact that hardly ever sanctions will solve the conflict, because the effect is a long-term. It's a kind of it's gradual. I think the Russians are also in the process of adjusting their economy to this situation. So they will find, they cannot fully replace the Western trade with something else, but they can replace it partially. They can find new routes and so on and so on. So there's an adjustment going on. So they will find a new normal for the economy, which will be lower than they used to have. And it will limit some of their options. But I don't think the timeline of this impact is anything like that would kind of sort of instantly prevent them from continuing this war. So I think these are what happens in the field, in the battlefield, and what happens largely with the economy and society. I think the timelines are different, and one shouldn't expect that the sanctions will solve this militarily.
Yeah, it's not going to save Severodonetsk.
Yeah.
Well, if you're joining NATO, you're obviously joining in part pushed by the Russian aggression in Ukraine, and Europe and NATO are returning traditional deterrence missions after out of area operations. I would just add Finland played a role in Afghanistan as well and deployed large numbers of troops there. But if you're signing up for NATO, it's not just an alliance focused purely on this issue, but it's has something of a global aperture. The London summit, the most recent summit, had several references to the People's Republic of China in it. And so thinking decades ahead, and it's a commitment in perpetuity unless you leave NATO in the future, should you join, what is the Finnish attitude on the PRC? I think what has made news in Washington and what baseline observers have understood is that it's taken a robust stance on telecommunications. I think Finland is out front on even 6G research. And of course, Sweden and Finland are known for two crown jewels in the telecoms community, Ericsson and Nokia. Can you address all of that and give us a view towards what bringing those telecom giants into the alliance could mean as well?
Just one point still on NATO.
Sure.
I would say that obviously we are where we are. We have this common border with the Russians. I think even as a NATO member, we would be in a position that we would like to maintain some level of communication with the Russians. We have to control the border. We always will have a number of issues that we have to regulate together, starting from traffic, many of these things. People have to be able to move across. Many Russians do live in Finland and vice versa. So there's always an element of communication between us. And Russia will stay as our neighbor forever. Then,
and there may be a brain drain heading to Finland.
There is a brain drain, yes, that's taking place. And also many Russians actually use Finland as a gateway to the West in that respect. But then we do realize that obviously nationally we'll focus heavily on our own defense, which is at the same time and will be a part of NATO defense. But we do realize that NATO is about 360 degrees of defense. So we do take seriously also the concerns of the southern member states. So we do believe that NATO can be a strong alliance only if it's really everybody for everybody. So we have to keep this in mind. Obviously, Ukraine conflict will kind of puts more focus on the northern Europe.
Focuses the minds.
And yes, but still, I think we will always remember this. Then on China or technology, I think you are totally correct that we have what the U.S. and NATO, other NATO member states, they do now see that NATO is about to get to industrially and technologically developed countries as part of the alliance. I would say Nokia and Ericsson are only part of the picture. They are major players, obviously in 5G, 6G, and we do have a lot of cooperation with the U.S. administration on this. And just to give an example, how well connected Nokia is with the U.S., they own Bell Labs, for example. Not many Americans know
I didn't know that
this major national laboratory is today owned by Nokia, and they are making groundbreaking research on many issues, including 6G, like you mentioned. They still earn roughly 3 patents a day, including Saturdays and Sundays. So, and they are part of the also American technological ecosystem. So we are close.
And the American work week, 7 days a week, it sounds like.
It's perfect, yeah. Also in that respect. And also Nokia, they employ roughly 10,000 people in the US. They heavily focus their R&D in the US. So we are also already connected. So Nokia is also to an extent a US company already. Then I would add that we have other capabilities as well. Finland is among roughly 10 countries globally that have been able to build up their own quantum computer, and it's up and running. We do have, in certain quantum technological dimensions, we do have, I would say, leading edge companies, and people do recognize it here in the US. We just signed a joint statement on our quantum cooperation just in April. So we do have a lot of, then AI is one of those things. So I think we do have, we will play a role in defining the future technologies. And I think what I do here in Washington, D.C. is that people do realize that if we, the Europeans and the Americans, if we want to be in the leading edge of these technologies, we have to do it together. If we try to do it separately and in kind of a damaging competition against each other, I think we will both be worse off. So I think this is one of the leading messages I have, that we have to be able to develop these things together. We have to be able to define and influence the standards of these new technologies, and we will also have to be able to make sure that we can also finance each other, because that will make us as much stronger.
Well, great. Anybody who follows you on Twitter will notice that you've had several late nights at Dulles recently,
Yeah.
pictures that you've posted because it's high times in Finnish-American relations. You've had the most senior members of your government in town, visiting with the Secretary of State, visiting with the President. You just mentioned before we began taping that the Senate Foreign Relations Committee had opened up to you, and you've had lots of conversations with members and senators. So perhaps as a concluding question, what secrets can you tell us from those conversations? What's the tenor of those talks been like? What would surprise us, or what would you just reinforce as threads that kind of weave their way through these talks on American-Finnish relations?
I think it's fair to say that Finnish-US relations are better than they have ever been. They were never bad, but now I think the intensity, the levels of cooperation, I think they are unprecedented. We have never seen anything like this. So I think it's great to be an ambassador in times like this. Obviously, all this happens with the backdrop of this dramatic conflict in Ukraine, which we'll never forget. But still, I have to say that Finland joining the alliance, Finland having this level of political contacts with the US, I think this is really something that strengthens not only Finland's but also the US security, and it will also strengthen. I would say this to the viewers all across America. It will also bring jobs to the US. It will bring investments. It will bring more trade between us. So I think everybody will benefit from this closer, better than ever relationship that we have right at the moment. I think in my meetings, what I kind of hear from my US interlocutors is that I don't think it's something that happened like overnight. I think people do recognize the long-term strengths of Finland. I think one of the key factors, be it in Senate, in the administration, is that Finland is seen as a strong, solid democracy, which is a kind of a really safe ally. No surprises, no kind of strange things, nothing negative, basically. So I think it's a kind of a testimony to many people who have worked before me, and of course for the long history of our country, because when we started our path as an independent country, it wasn't so easy and it wasn't so clear. So I think it's a long-term relationship that we've had, which now it's easy to kind of bring it to the next level. And I've basically only heard positive things. So I can't claim that my work is totally easy. It's not always easy, but still I have to say that we feel that we are here among friends and among people with whom we share the same values, and that makes it so much easier.
Well, thank you, Mr. Ambassador. And on that high note, I think it's a great way to end this discussion. Thanks so much for coming to Hudson Institute for what I hope is just your inaugural visit. We'll have you back again sometime in the near future. Thank you all at home for watching. For more of Hudson Institute's work on European security and the world writ large, please visit hudson.org, and we look forward to seeing you on our next broadcast. Thank you very much.